an instrument that measures what a student has learned. Now, I have never heard that put that way before, but I like that. I was in a church not long ago, and I asked a question. I've heard the saying, that is real spiritual. And I could see nothing spiritual. I mean, I'm talking about something on TV. That is spiritual, and nothing about it was spiritual to me. And so I asked the question, what is spirituality? And different ones made statements. There was a young fella, and I suppose it was with his dad, had come in late. They sat toward the back in that church. I had never seen them before, and I've never seen them since. That young man stood up and gave one of the most beautiful explanations of what spirituality is. And I have wished that I had wrote it down, but I hadn't, so I've let it slip my mind. And I can't find the guy, so I can't get his exact words, but spirituality is not what the world calls spirituality in a lot of cases. And I'm not going to preach on that tonight, but I am going to, since I have had to change my style of preaching, I like to use illustrations. I like to use some experiences. I like to use things that will relate hopefully to the Word of God and to the thought that I'm going to bring out. But I do want to give you a little more opportunity. If somebody wants to say what a test is, or in fact what Jesus said here, He knew what He was going to do, and He said this to prove Him or to test Him. So either one of those, does anyone have any comment on what you would like to, what your thought is about it? To prove or to test? Well, I guess I'm drier than I thought I was. But tonight, I want to talk a little bit about Jesus wanting to know what is in us. What motivates us? What keeps us going? And I thought of me taking a test one time when I didn't even know I was taking a test. Can I move around a little bit? Just a little bit. Move around just a little bit. Get back here where I can see the eyeballs. I took a test without knowing I was taking a test. And I passed it. And I didn't even know it was a test until years later. I had become a journeyman carpenter at the age of 19 years of age. The union wanted me to join the union and become a journeyman carpenter, and I was delighted because I was making more money than I had ever made in my life. And so I was thrilled and I was excited, and I worked and I helped finish that school that we were building on the reservation in Hoopaw, California. And after I left that job, I was living in an ex-sawmill camp. Has anyone ever lived in a sawmill camp? They used to build a sawmill, and then they would build houses around the perimeter, and the workers would live in those little houses. And it was handy for them that way, and they could keep them close at hand when they needed them. So anyway, this old sawmill had run its course. They had abandoned it. They'd moved all of the equipment out, but they still had those little cabins around the perimeter of the property. And my wife and I were newlyweds, and we had moved into one of those cabins because we were cheap and the cabins were cheap. I think we were paying like $15 a month for rent. And that came around every month too. But since we were there so close, they had started to build a veneer plant on the property. And I thought, well, I'm already a journeyman carpenter now, so I will get a job as a carpenter at this, that actually was almost in my front yard. And I didn't know I was going to have to take a test because I was a journeyman carpenter. I didn't know that he was going to prove me. So the first morning on that job, I went out and asked him, I said, do you need any help? And he said, well, you come tomorrow and I'll try you. I went the next day to work, and the first thing he said to me was, I want you to go out there. There was all kinds of old lumber left from the sawmill. He said, I want you to get some lumber, and I want you to build me a set of sawhorses. And he said, I want some heavy ones. Well, here a 19-year-old kid, what does he know about horses? And he said, heavy ones, what do I know about heavy sawhorses? You take a 2x4 and turn it flat ways and you make some legs on it and you got a sawhorse. But he wanted a pair of sawhorses. So I went out, I found some heavy material, I thought, a 4x6 rough sawn lumber, had not been surfaced, so it was plenty heavy. I went out and got some rough sawn 1x6 or 1x8, which had not been surfaced, which was probably about 1.25 inches by 7 or 8 inches wide. And I knew nothing about sawhorses, except that I had used them. But I looked at them and I said, okay, I think this ought to be about the angle of the legs. I think that they ought to be mortised in and adapted in about this much. And I built, and not to be tooting my own horn, God helped me, but I built a wonderful pair of sawhorses. And I went in, found the boss, and I said, Johnny, I have those sawhorses built. Now, had I known it was a test, I don't know what kind of mess I would have made of it. You've been around sawhorses all your life, or a long time. Mm-hmm. Not all your life, you're not through living yet. No, not yet. And I was kind of proud of them. And I went in and I said, Johnny, I've got those sawhorses built. And he came out and he looked at them, and you imagine those big, bulky 4x6 body and he said, well, they look pretty good, but I wanted some heavy ones. What I didn't realize, they were going to be, in building that mill, they were going to be using 12x12 timbers, laying them on that sawhorse, rolling them, drilling holes, cutting, doing whatever they needed to with them. So he wanted some real heavy duty. But to make a long story short, I passed the test. He tried me, and I didn't know I'd passed the test, but I got the job and I stayed with it. After we got the mill built, he said, will you stay on as our maintenance carpenter? After all of the journeyman carpenters that had served their apprenticeship, served their years of working at the trade, he chose me, the only one. I passed the test good and proper. Sometime after that, they asked me to come into Eureka to the Union Hall. They wanted to initiate me. You've passed every test as far as the union is concerned. Now we want to really solidify it and make you a journeyman carpenter, and you will have your card to carry. And while I'm sitting in an audience of old-timers, some of them 50 years old. Well, I was a kid, so it seemed like a long time. I was sitting there and listening, and I had some shocking revelation. These fellows was talking. They were waiting their turn, and I was waiting my turn. And one of them said, you know, they don't test carpenters like they used to. Boy, my ears perked up. Said, used to, when you hired out as a carpenter, the first thing they did was ask you to build them a set of sawhorses. Had I known, man, I would have been nervous. But I built them a set of sawhorses, second to none as far as I was concerned. But it made me nervous then because I had taken a test without knowing I was taking a test. And I passed the test. Jesus wants to know if we're going to be able to go in and work with everybody else. He wants to know what we're made of. He wants to know what we're capable of doing. So He's going to put us to the test. He said to Philip, what are we going to do? We've got a bunch of people here. And we don't want to send them away and cause them to faint along the way. We want to feed them. What are we going to do? Philip said, well, 200 pennyworth of bread is not enough. But he did that he knew what he was going to do. Did you know you can never back Jesus in the corner? You can never force Him to use plan B. He's already got a plan. And if you will follow Him, He's going to come through for you. If you will pass every test that comes your way. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I've passed every test. Did you know I have even, don't tell anyone that I told you this, but I've even murmured and complained a little bit. That is not passing that test. When things are thrown at you, you murmur and you complain.